Good afternoon to everyone. It's a bit of a change of tempo. I've been listening to wonderful talks in very precise and concise terms. And now we move into a domain that's a little more philosophy. And I hope to be just as precise, but for me it's a little more difficult. Well, it's difficult anyway. We'll see how it goes. The subject, intent and the process of becoming conscious. And as this subject is a vast subject, the hope I have is of going into one small element, of shining a light in one small area of it, which is the area of concept formation. How do we form concepts? What are concepts? And if we can just handle that little bit, because it's quite in the center of things, since it's about the relationship between subject and its object, the knower and the known, the observer and the observed. So, the role of intent in concept formation. Intent, this is what we'll be talking about. Intent, what is it? Concepts, how do they arise? Just a brief look at intent and causality, and some implications of it all. Now, as a starting point, I want to take a letter to the New Scientist in the most recent edition. That was a short letter that was referring to an article that was there earlier, that was published earlier by David Bainbridge. And this is what the letter said. David Bainbridge's description of consciousness, including, for example, the fact that we do not know where in the brain consciousness happens, was evocative. Scott McCloud, in his book Understanding Comics, describes a comics story as whatever is happening in the blank spaces between the panels. And he goes on to say this. What if our minds function like a comic? They snap pictures, and our consciousness is simply the story the mind constructs around these pictures. I'll let you take a second look. Now, I pick up 3 points from this. One point seems to be the suggestion that the crucial part is happening outside of consciousness, not in the conscious mind. The second point that I consider is the fact that the mind is consciousness and unconsciousness. It's one system working apparently in two manners. This is not directly stated. It's not denied and not stated in this. And the third point is the point that's left out. And it's left out very commonly in discussions of this sort, and that is the question of intent and the implication of intent in this whole, in the working of the mind. So, let's move there. What is intent? Let's say you have the intent to overtake a vehicle on the road. You want to pass someone up. Where is that intent? You might have the thought in your mind, but the thought isn't yet the intent. The intent is somewhere deeper. The intent to overtake is something you feel more viscerally. You have a muscle tension. You have maybe a facial expression that goes with it. You clasp the wheel a little tighter, the driving wheel, and so forth. It works through the whole muscular system and maybe the blood and the heart. And in the end of it all, if we're looking for the origin of intent, we've got to go into maybe every cell of the body. On the other hand, if we look for the outcome, the objective of intent, it's very easy. The objective of intent, to overtake, is to overtake. If you have the intent to stand up, the objective is to stand up. If you have the intent to be home at 7 o'clock, the intent, in other words, we name it by its endpoint, by the outcome, which is single. And the origin of intent sort of gets lost. It multiplies, it's multi-pronged, going back. A very rough diagram, we can just think of intent. The outcome on the right is singular. And as we go back, it sort of dissipates into the whole system. Now, oh, look at that. Wait, you wait here.
Oh, I'll wait here. Technical difficulty.
What was in your mind while I was doing that? What was happening? What did you think while I'm doing that? Wait a minute. Yes? What was going on? Now, I could ask this, but we're not going to manage in 20 minutes. So what I do is very quickly, I say with all the different things that came and you imagined in your mind, there's one place where you all had the same, had the same structure. And that is on intent. The intent that you have here, you all meet on it. And what is that intent? What is the intent where we were all common? Yes? To wonder what's going on, yes, but some of you might have thought, yes, something, I was picking up something. So the intent was that there's something there. So we all met on the intent that there be a thing. That's very important. It's not nothing. The fact that there has to be some entity there. So we were all aiming at entityhood, if you want to call it. Something that has to be at the end. I can't remember what my next slide is. Yes. So if we look at the... oh, it's moved. Here it comes. And by the way, you were right over there. It is a ladybug. Yes. See. And when I say the word ladybug, what comes into your mind? Yes? Again, some people have an image, some people have something a memory that comes back, some people might see the word written up or hear the word or whatever it is, but these are only the triggers of the concept. The concept, ladybug, that you have in your mind is actually myriad things coming together. It's small, it's red, it's spotted. The whole idea of insect, alive, able to fly, what's it doing inside in the room, and memories that you have and all sorts of associations of maybe joy and beauty. And there's so many things that all fuse together in that moment when you come to the idea or form the concept, ladybug. How does that happen? If it were the rational mind, it couldn't do it. All those things we can't think of all at once in a split second. And even if we did, it would be a compendium of things. It wouldn't be one thing fused like it was. So what is actually going on at that moment? And the answer to the problem comes back to what we said about intent. Intent, you throw the intent out of coming up with something, and depending on what thing that is, a whole area of qualities sort of change into attributes of that object, and you have the object that you're talking about. And so, if I want to give just a a graphic idea. The intent is the blue arrow. So you're heading down, and before anything is there, you're aiming at an empty spot, saying, I'm going to get something to come out there. And then depending on which direction the whole situation is, that thing fills up with meanings relative to whatever it is. Yes? So, this, I think, is what leads us, yes, to our ladybug. Now, it's this whole realm of things that fuse or come to us in the unconscious mind. And it's the moment that they fuse into the object that we become conscious. For that, I'd need to bring some other slides and show you how it works, but you know it from double drawings and things like that. Our mind clicks into one view, into another view, and we're not conscious of the build-up in any way. The fusion, the build-up, whatever you want to call it, the coming together, happens out of consciousness. And consciousness awakens with the object, with the concept that arrives. So, from this, we can conclude the mind, conscious, not conscious, and both infused with intent, produces concepts. There's no essence to the concept, but in acting as if there was one, zoom, yes, the arrow, a concept is formed. And such is the power of intent. Since time is short, I'll just one little anecdote for the end. If we look at intent and causality, we saw intent as the point, the end point is singular, and that's the name of what's going on. The beginning fuses back into the whole system. And this is as much part of reality as is the same structure reversed, which is causality, as it's usually described, without going into. And so you have the initial impulse. The impulse spreads. One billiard ball knocks another billiard ball. That one knocks a few others. That knocks a few others. Energy dissipates in friction, and so on and so forth. And in the end of it all, it's all dissipating out into the world as the world's entropy rises. And so we have a form, a contrast of forms. And it's interesting to note that causality, of course, is with the push. And intent is being drawn to an end. These are just a few thoughts that come from, that we have time for right now, in peering into how concepts are formed, and taking back from the article in The New Scientist, where the person is trying to describe things in terms of what you see and what you don't see, and leaving out, according to the way I understand it, the whole impulse of intention and, of course, its subjectivity. And with that, I conclude. Yes.
I didn't think. I knew.
Right.
It wasn't a thought process. It was a knowing.
Yes.
So there wasn't any cause or effect. It was.
Right.
How do you explain that?
Oh, there are two things there. First of all, if you want an explanation of your intuition in knowing what I was thinking about, there are people here who can speak about that much better than I could, yes? But if you're talking about the fact that you did come up with something, yes? Sure, you came up with Ladybug, but the whole idea, what drove you to a concrete object, yes, to some kind of entity, some thing, is the mindset you had of, or the intent of reaching such a single object. Because the mind can be geared to in another way, so we don't do that.
It was your intention, directed. You did that by holding it like that.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly picked up on something that was happening in my mind too. Yes? Yes.
Peter, that was such a wonderfully artistic presentation of the importance of intention. But I wonder whether you've left out the other side,
Okay.
which is that a whole large side of the cone that explores possibilities. And we tend to emphasize in discussing consciousness too often a specific willed outcome rather than the distributed attention that explores possibilities intuitively with the right brain and so forth. And I wonder if you would comment on that.
Thank you very much for bringing it up, because I couldn't arrive there in the 20 minutes that I had, or 15 minutes. And yes, very definitely. This intent at finishing with a particular endpoint is one structure of intent. Yes? And what you're talking about, a right brain or something like that, we can look at what happens when you let go of that intent, and there's another structure forming. Thank you. All right, is that? Mm-hmm.
What about intentionless processes, such as meditation and so on, in which one tries to remove intention so as to come to some sort of a conclusion or concept or formation?
Again, the intent that I described here is the intent of the denotative, conscious, rational mind. And it's also the drive behind classical science. There is a letting go of all of that. Yeah? And the letting go of all of that is that it allows for a whole new possibility of integration. In fact, I was going to do an exercise with you for that, but I think it's finished. Yes, no time now. So, but in other words, there is such a thing as letting go to get the big picture also, of stepping back and wanting to get a feel of a whole. Because wholes don't come through. A whole is not made by the rational mind. The concept lands in our lap, so to speak, ready-made. But behind that is the working of the unconscious mind, which is producing it. And if we take away the goal of ending up with some particular thing, there are all sorts of possibilities of the mind that are there. I don't know if I answered, but that's good. Thank you.